Welcome in to A Conversation With on Comcast CityWide TV, Cable Channel 6. I'm Tom Pace, and normally there's a guest beside me. Today, sadly, there is not one because he passed. He passed back on Wednesday, April the 23rd, 2015. Charles Rex Scottt, District Attorney for Caddo for 6 years, going into his 7th, and dying very suddenly. Although I didn't know D.A. Scott as long as many people did, I counted those years I knew him as great friends and really a lot of respect and love. It was about 2 years ago, March the 5th of 2013, that D.A. Scott sat in the studio with me. And we talked about his baby, if you will, the new forensic lab that's going to be built here. And as a tribute to Charles Rex Scott, we're going to play that for you. Give you a little insight about the man and how much he loved what he did. Please take a look. Producer and director says, stand by Tom and you're up, and welcome in. I'm Tom Pace, the host of the Talk of the Town on The Promise 90.7 FM, and also on my website, which is shrevetalk.com. Today, the host of Comcast CityWide TV presents a conversation with Caddo District Attorney Charles Rex Scott right here in the CityWide TV studios. And today, talking about a number of issues regarding law enforcement, not the least of which is the big one that has just been announced, that they're letting bids for the new North Louisiana Crime Lab facility soon to be built here in Shreveport, Louisiana. And Judge Scott, and I say Judge Scott, I know you wear that title as well because you were a former, Chief Judge, is that right?
Former Chief Judge for 5 years, and a judge for a total of 27 years.
So you've been judging, and now you're prosecuting.
That's correct.
But as a district attorney and the head man for Caddo Parish, you are mantled with a large number of decisions as to who faces trial for what serious, many times heinous crimes, correct?
That's correct. I've got the responsibility and the duty for the prosecution of trial of crime pursuant to state law, and which means that the district attorney under state law has the discretion, the obligation, the responsibility for what happens insofar as the furtherance of state law in the court system and advisor to the grand jury. So there's a lot going on in Caddo Parish, just like there's a lot going on in every jurisdiction
in the United States. And before we get to the crime lab, because that's big news, I think a lot of people hear the word grand jury and have no idea who comprises it and what it means.
Well, let me speak to that issue just for a moment. The grand jury consists of 12 persons and usually a couple of alternates. They meet in secret, and the district attorney's office advises the grand jury about the crimes. The grand jury, well, let me say this, there are 3 ways to institute a prosecution under Louisiana law. One is by bill of information, one is by affidavit, and the other is by indictment by the grand jury. An affidavit might be like a traffic ticket. If you look at the traffic ticket very closely, it will be an affidavit form, State of Louisiana, Parish of Caddo, and it will have a notarization on it, which becomes an affidavit when the officer signs it. The other is by bill of information. The district attorney or an assistant district attorney can sign a bill of information charging a person with a crime, whether or not they've been arrested. 99% of the time they've been arrested by a law enforcement agency. Occasionally there's something that would come along that there would not be an arrest for, but there would be a bill of information. And the third is a grand jury indictment.
Where does the grand jury come from? Who are those people?
Who constitutes a grand jury? The grand jury is called from the voter rolls. Similar to jury duty, a special, but it's in the same manner, but a special veneer is picked for the grand jury. And it's chosen at random? Absolutely at random from the voter rolls. And the person's served for 6 months. They usually meet once a month, and usually for 3 or 4 days.
Do you ever have a special session when there's something that's coming up that they need to address?
Yes, absolutely. We pick a new grand jury in January and in June or July of every year. As I say, they serve for 6 months. They meet in the grand jury room. They hear testimony of witnesses, including lay witnesses, citizens, police officers, sometimes scientists.
And is that testimony in there? It's not necessarily protected as such. If the grand jurors ask a question, it should be answered, correct?
Yes, and it is answered by the witnesses. And then when the grand jury deliberates, the DA as advisor to the grand jury is out of the grand jury. So they meet as citizens, and they become a very important force at that point. And of course, the secrecy of the grand jury proceedings is very important to safeguard witnesses and identity of witnesses and things of that nature.
Not the least of which also is to safeguard the names of those grand jurors, lest they be, targeted by someone who is less than happy what the grand jury did.
And we have not had that sort of a problem.
Well, but I bring that up.
Absolutely. And it is a potential concern that some of them have. But, Tom, through the years, people whether they're called for the grand jury or whether they're called for a trial jury, and they may say, I don't want to do that. I'm not qualified to do that. I don't have time to do that. I'd have to take away from my work or whatever. Almost to a person, they have thanked me for not getting out of that, because they learned so much about the system and about what's going on in Caddo Parish. It's fascinating. It is absolutely fascinating.
Well, if you've ever watched an episode of Law and Order or any of the judicial type television shows, it's kind of a microcosm, I guess, of what you would see here. And today, again, we're sitting here in the Comcast CityWide TV studios with the Caddo District Attorney, Charles Rex Scottt, who has now been on the job soon to be, 6 years or so?
Right. This is my 5th year.
5th year. Mm-hmm. And he's the man overseeing many of those, I guess it would be felony crimes,
Absolutely.
Correct?
Felony and misdemeanor crimes. A felony in Louisiana is any crime for which a person may be punished at hard labor. And you mentioned the television shows and things, and one of the most popular shows is the CSI series. And that ties in directly with what the persons, whether they're called for jury duty, for the trial jury, or for the grand jury, expects to see by way of scientific evidence. And that's where the crime lab comes in. So it's so important to everybody in North Louisiana.
And then he's talking about the North Louisiana Crime Lab that was signed off on by the governor some, 4 or 5 years, 3, 4, how many years ago?
Several years ago. As a matter of fact, the initiation of the new crime lab predated me being the district attorney. The current crime lab is located in the old Brook Street Elementary School. And the building has had a lot of maintenance issues, including roof issues, leakage issues, some security issues that we've had to address. Part of the obligations of the Caddo District Attorney by statute is to serve as chair of the North Louisiana Criminalistic Laboratory Commission. The North Louisiana Crime Lab, and soon to be the Forensic Science Center, will cover and does cover 29 parishes in North Louisiana.
29?
29 parishes. So from the Sabine River to the Mississippi River, south to Alexandria, Vernon Parish, which is Leesville, Avoyelles Parish, Marksville, in that area down there, all the way to Arkansas. So over 1.2 million people are served, and about half of the landmass of Louisiana.
And so you're talking about Tallulah and those
Absolutely.
Ouachita parishes,
Sure.
and all those
Ouachita,
coming.
Morehouse, Grant, Rapides, Madison, all of them over there.
And so now all of a sudden, with this money, and it was millions of dollars.
$24 million is for the project, Tom, and that brings up a good point. Several years ago, the legislature provided in House Bill 2, the Capital Outlay Bill, $5 million in Priority 1, which is basically cash money, cash in the bank, ready to be spent. We have 4.8 million of that left after some fees and things of that nature for the planning, architectural drawings, and some other things. The legislature also provided in Priority 5 $19 million. Now that $19 million after a few years. We worked hard on that for the last few years, and let me pause and thank right now the governor and the governor's staff, including Paul Rainwater, the chief of staff, Christy Nichols, the commissioner of administration, and very importantly our local legislative delegation. This crime lab will be located in Representative Roy Burrell's district. But all of the legislators, without exception, have supported this crime lab, and we're very, very appreciative of that. We're expecting to go to bid in mid-April and hopefully to occupy the new building in January of 2015, which sounds like a long way off, but it's not.
Well, it's right around the corner.
Exactly.
if one is looking at this. And this will be truly a state-of-the-art forensic laboratory, similar, although I think they take some liberties on CSI and things that they get the DNA back in 30 minutes or something.
The only liberties I've seen them take is with the time and the results.
Right.
Okay? Which is everything to a crime lab. But our local crime lab is something that the citizens of Louisiana could really be proud of, because they've got the accreditation, they've got the personnel, and it's a great operation. I can't emphasize enough the importance of having a good accredited crime lab for not only the prosecution of the guilty, but the exoneration of the innocent. And the crime lab works both ways. If a suspect could not have committed the crime because of the circumstances, and the crime lab can confirm that, then that is a great relief to that person and that person's family.
He's excluded as the suspect or the perpetrator.
That's correct. But likewise, if the person is guilty and we can prove that, then that goes a long way towards public safety. And the local crime lab has been instrumental in solving many burglary cases lately, in addition to murder and rape cases. So hold that thought, because when we come back, we're going to talk about those instrumental within the crime lab and the man who's in charge of it, and also have to talk to Judge Scott about Todd Thoma. He's our coroner, but he's also been instrumental in a lot of things that have happened here in continuing this effort to get the crime lab. And so there's a number of issues to still cover. If you're watching Law and Order, if you're watching NCIS, you need to be watching the show right now, because we've got the Caddo District Attorney, Charles Rex Scottt, in the studio with us that you might not ever have an audience with. So stand by. We'll be back in just a couple of minutes. Comcast CityWide TV presents Conversation with Caddo District Attorney Charles Rex Scottt. I'm Tom Pace. We'll see you in just a moment.
Hey there. Yes, you. I'm going to give you a snap quiz. Oh, don't worry, it's not going to count toward your grades. Okay, let's see if you're required to register with the Selective Service, okay? First, are you under 18 years old or over 25? Are you on active military duty or enrolled in West Point or one of the other service academies? Are you a student in an ROTC program at the Citadel, Virginia Military Institute, North Georgia College, Norwich University, Virginia Polytechnic, or Texas A&M? Well, that's it. You passed with a perfect score of 0. Any of these situations would have been an exception to the law requiring young men to register with a selective service. Virtually all men living in the United States must register when they turn 18. Go to www.sss.gov and register.
Being a gold medalist skier requires a lot of hard work, intense training, and time outside on the mountain. But taking care of my skin is easy and doesn't affect my performance. Every day I apply sunscreen and wear protective gear. I know protecting my skin will help prevent skin cancer and avoid wrinkles. I get my skin checked regularly by a dermatologist. 1 in 5 Americans will develop some form of skin cancer in their lifetime. My name is Julia Mancuso and I'm wearing orange to help put a spotlight on skin cancer.
And as Al Moore says, you're back. Welcome back in. Comcast CityWide TV presents Conversation with Caddo District Attorney Charles Rex Scottt today. I'm Tom Pace, the host of the Talk of the Town, and I'm proud to host this 30-minute segment, although technically it's 24 minutes. But the deal is that if one thinks of our criminal justice system and the system of checks and balances, one of those systems has to do with forensic evidence, as has been pointed out by D.A. Scott. Well, that just ties directly into the major announcement that came just about a week, 10 days ago, that the new North Louisiana Crime Lab is letting bids for the actual construction of this beautiful new facility. And Judge Scott, thanks for again being in the broadcast today.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate
Well,
it.
and as I said to you many times, and when we do these broadcasts, it's not just because it's a learning experience. Many times it's answering questions that people might not have the opportunity to have an audience with you, because I think people think, oh, well, they just can sit down and do a time. We had to check a schedule. Did you tell me time management is a big issue with you?
Oh, absolutely, because of all the obligations. I would like to spend more time in the courtroom, more time in the classroom. I need to spend more time in the office, more time at civic clubs, and more time for interviews like this, but there's only so much time in a day. I need about another 48 hours every day.
Can we please, and you work on that, you go introduce a bill,
Right.
I'll sign it.
There you go.
Well, and also don't forget more time with your wife,
Absolutely.
Miss Alexis, because
Absolutely.
she's the woman behind you.
That's right. That's
Okay.
right. I'm very blessed.
Yes, and so let's go straight to the crime lab, and we know that all of our legislators, to a man, to a woman, stood right there in the CCC area when the governor
Absolutely.
came and said, yes, you will get this money.
Exactly.
But nobody thought, could sense the reality. Now it's there, and one of those who is so integral is our coroner, Dr. Todd
Absolutely.
Thoma.
Todd Thoma, the coroner, and Steve Prater, the sheriff of Caddo, are both integral parts of getting this all done. You know, you mentioned the coroner. Part of the new crime lab will be a forensic pathology unit, and we're doing this in connection with LSU Health Science Center, so that there will be both a teaching and a service that is provided for forensic pathology. Many jurisdictions in the 29 parish area now go outside of the state of Louisiana for their forensic pathology services, their autopsies. But that can be done right here on Linwood and Tulane in the new building.
Wow.
Another part of the new building will be a full toxicology lab, which does not exist now in Louisiana.
So if they want to run a tox screen?
Correct.
For an event.
Right, absolutely, for something, for one of the incidents that are involved. Let's say, for example, you've got a fatality involving a suspected alcohol or controlled dangerous substances, or one of its analogs, then that's got to be done on a tox screen. But that's done out of state now. So this new facility will allow for that to be done right here in Caddo Parish.
And it would also save us money, save the citizens money where we would have paid. And if I remember correctly, prior to Dr. Toma taking over, a lot of our autopsies were done out of state.
That's correct.
But now they've come back in-house.
Right, a lot of that's true. Exactly. We still have to rely on getting testimony from out of state, and that's part of the future cost of having someone out of state doing it, because we've got to get the doctor from Little Rock down to the courtroom in Caddo Parish, and that's expensive. So if we can get someone right here from Linwood to the courthouse, that's a lot less expensive. And the same is true whether the person's testifying in Bossier, Webster, Claiborne, Jackson, Union.
This covers 29
Lincoln.
parishes.
Sure, absolutely.
All right. And again, with Caddo District Attorney Charles Rex Scottt, as we talk about the North Louisiana Crime Lab, a $24 million state-of-the-art facility, help people understand exactly, you said it's going to be adjacent down there off of Linwood. Is that going to be near the Med Center? Exactly.
Correct.
Where?
It is. It's a little bit south of the Med Center and across, which would be on the west side of Linwood, at Linwood and Tulane Street.
And so your director over there at the crime lab, very nice man. I spoke with him on my radio show.
Jimmy Barnhill.
Jimmy Barnhill.
Right.
He works in concert, I guess, with Dr. Toma and everybody else, correct?
That's correct. And Jimmy is a wonderful scientist, and he's a very good director for the crime lab.
When you talk about director, does he oversee the entire operation? Is that what his mission is?
Yes, that is correct. And plus, there's satellite offices now in Monroe and in Alexandria that a lot of people don't realize. That's all part of the North Louisiana Crime Lab. But all of the DNA testing is done right here in Shreveport. But each of the satellite locations, whether Monroe or Alexandria, they work on firearms analysis, and I think they do chemical, paint, fiber, those sorts of things.
DNA, that's an interesting deal because it can exonerate a person, it can help convict a person. We talked about that on the CSI shows, as we all know. It looks like they can do it in 30 minutes, and they have to compress that time for the length of the show. What's the actual time on DNA analysis?
I would defer to Jimmy Barnhill on that, or Pat Boykavich on that. But it's considerably longer. I think, Tom, I don't remember specifically.
I think it's a couple of weeks.
I think that's right.
Could be a month.
It is certainly not the same day. Okay, and I don't believe it can even be done in the same week.
However, just recently there was a perpetrator that was put behind bars based on DNA evidence that they had left in a fight or something where their blood was transferred, and they were able to send that DNA over to the crime lab.
And plus, we also participate in the CODIS. I can't remember exactly what that stands for, but it's a nationwide data bank of DNA evidence, so that if there's evidence of a crime outside of Louisiana, then we might pick it up here and send that information to that jurisdiction, and vice versa. If they pick up somebody that's got that from a crime here, that's good, and it all makes sense. It's not as fast and not as convincing as it is on television, because they've got to get all that stuff done within 50 minutes or so. But it is an essential part of the criminal prosecution in Louisiana.
When I invited you to come here, I said I want to talk about the crime lab, but we don't want to forget about those individuals that are awaiting sentencing, awaiting trial, and you're the district attorney. You're the one that also could maybe make that possibly go a little faster. Where are we in that?
Well, we're doing very well. We're doing much better in reducing the delay of persons who are unsentenced at the local jail. For our discussion purposes, and in fact, the local prisoners are at the local taxpayer's expense. Whereas if someone, even though they're serving time at CCC, if they're a state prisoner, a Department of Corrections prisoner, then the state pays for that. So we're trying to move as quickly as possible the persons that are awaiting sentencing. The charges either need to be dismissed, they need to be prosecuted, or result in a plea. A plea of guilty or no contest or something like that that's going to close out the unsentenced portion of that person's status.
So it's moving faster, so that means shorter wait times. That means less money that we would have to pay as citizens that would house them.
That's correct. And overall, we've seen a reduction in the number of persons that are actually in CCC. But particularly, we've seen a reduction in the number of waiting sentencing. And there are many reasons for that, Tom. Well, we've seen a reduction in the violent crime rate in Caddo Parish. And I think that's true really over most of the nation.
It's been said that, and yet still, sadly, any day you turn on the TV, there has been some sort of violent crime.
Yes,
and it's real easy to say, oh, there's been a reduction in it, but when it's in your neighborhood, all of a sudden it becomes front and center.
Absolutely. And we deal with persons and work with them who are the victims or the families of victims of crime. We have a special department in the district attorney's office for victims assistance program. And we work closely with the victims of crime. And we listen to them.
And that's very important because nobody can sit in the victim's shoes. Only you, individual, were the one that the crime was perpetrated against or whatever the situation was. And so if you take time in your office to understand those feelings, those emotions, and we know raw emotions can really play a huge part in sometimes trials. But if you can do that, then that gives you pause to realize you're a good listening post for those.
Well, that's right, and that's very important. You know, if we had no system, then persons would settle their conceived differences out on the street, and maybe they would be wrong, and you'd have innocent people killed. But so the system is very important, and the system needs to, and we do, listen to those that are impacted, the families of those persons who've been murdered or raped, the individuals who have suffered a loss or a burglary, and things of that nature. You know, these crimes affect the whole family. As a judge for 27 years and as district attorney for 5 years, I've seen hundreds of families that have just been destroyed because of crime.
One other thing, and this just recently occurred, when someone goes to or is going to trial, generally they can either choose a bench trial or a jury trial, correct?
The defendant has that option.
And here recently, we got about a minute, there was a situation where the law has changed to where they just can't defer to the last minute,
correct? There was a constitutional amendment that the people of Louisiana passed so that now the person has to choose no later than 45 days ahead of the trial date. Otherwise, it's a trial by jury. If they want to waive a trial by jury, they have to do it at least 45 days before trial.
There it is. It's been a quick half hour here with Caddo District Attorney Charles Rex Scottt on a conversation with Tom Pace here at Comcast CityWide TV Presents. I appreciate your time watching. Call up a friend. Tell them that the DA's office is here to help all of the citizens in this community. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you again soon. Thanks.